Mrs. Oliver here. I'm going to talk about some comprehension with the story A Fresh Idea. You can find that on pages 22 through 25 in your Floppy book, and it is the Unit 1, Week 1 story. We are introduced to a couple characters. One is Molly, her mother, and then also Mr. Taylor. And this is a realistic fiction story, which means that it's made up. However, the events and people that take place in the story could really happen. So as I continued reading, a short summary was that this girl Molly really loves tomatoes, and the neighbor that normally sells tomatoes is no longer having that business. So Molly approaches her neighbor, Mr. Taylor, and together they plant a garden in his yard so that she can have tomatoes. This is something that could happen in real life. You could have a garden. You could work together with a neighbor. So for that reason, it's realistic because it could happen in real life. And it's fiction because it's a made-up story. There's not any dates. There's not any facts. So we know that it is not nonfiction. Our comprehension strategy is to reread. And I wanted to reread, how does Molly get the idea to grow a garden of her own? So on page 23, I'm going to reread this paragraph. And by rereading, it allows me to either find text evidence or to form inferences so that I can answer that question. Just then, she noticed her neighbor, Mr. Taylor, looking at his daffodils. Molly knew he was thinking about how he had planted those flowers with his wife. This was the first spring since his wife had died, and Molly saw the sadness on his face. She had an idea. This reminds me that Mr. Taylor is already very good at growing things. Molly happens to be looking at his flower garden, and it is very, very beautiful. She also knows that Mr. Taylor is a little bit lonely because his wife had passed away. So when she decides to approach him, it's for two reasons. One, he has knowledge of how to plant gardens, and two, she wants to keep him company. Our comprehension skill is sequence. And this is a great strategy to apply to realistic fiction because all of those types of stories have a beginning, middle, and end. So again, our characters are Molly, her mom, and Mr. Taylor. The setting is Molly's neighborhood, and it's during the springtime. That's important because throughout our story, the season changes, and they also kind of foreshadow or look ahead to what things might be like in summer. So using a graphic organizer like the one I have here, I can put my information in the boxes to help organize my thoughts. So at the beginning of the story, Molly learns that the tomato stand will not be at the summer market anymore. Molly sees her neighbor in his garden and gets an idea. Mr. Taylor lets her use his land. So what happens in the middle is that Molly purchases tomato plants and works with Mr. Taylor in his yard to start the garden. Now, some smaller details happen after this, such as they're weeding and they put stakes up, they water the garden. I don't think any of those details are big enough to be an event, so I'm going to look forward towards the end where the garden has already been grown. Molly grows many tomatoes and is able to sell some for a profit. Profit means you're making money. Also, Mr. Taylor enjoys his time with Molly and will sell flowers in the summer. Okay, I hope that helped you understand your Floppy book story a little bit better, and I'll see you next time.